Let's talk pre-production. The Trainspotting novel was written in 1993, and like we talked about that earlier, and it was by Scottish author Irvine Welsh. Now, again, this is one of those novels that if you are not familiar with Scottish dialect, you're going to die trying to read it.
Yeah, this is basically... It's a culmination of a bunch of short stories he wrote loosely based around the same characters and universe. Mm-hmm. So it's not a normal, coherent structure, but, you know, it's just... These are the people we're talking about, and they're intertwined in their lives, and so on and so forth. So there's no structure to it. Mm-hmm. There's no beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
But it does have a natural beginning and a natural end point, if that makes sense.
Right.
The book is set...
In the 80s.
In the mid to late 80s, mm-hmm. judging by the fashion that they talk about, the politics that they talk about, mm-hmm. the socio-political, mm-hmm. The drug use in Edinburgh at the time.
Right.
Because there was a heroin epidemic in Edinburgh in the late 80s, which led to HIV epidemic in the 80s in Edinburgh.
Right.
So, in December 1993, producer Andrew McDonald was on a flight, and he read the book, mm-hmm. and he was convinced that he could make a movie out of it.
Okay. Well, and then he passed that on to Danny Boyle and John Hodge, who the three of them together had just finished working on Shallow Grave.
Shallow Grave is an excellent movie.
Love that movie. It has Ewan McGregor, and it also has Christopher Eccleston, who is... he's my favorite doctor.
He never scared me in anything that he ever did except that movie.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't a psychopath with guns and knives and yelling. Right. He was very, very quiet, lost his mind, and scared me. Yeah. We forgot to mention, by the way, that this wasn't the first... This film is not the first attempt to adapt Trainspotting to a larger audience. Not long after the book was released, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival had performances of a stage version of Trainspotting with local actors, and apparently went down really, really well with Irvine Welsh.
Huh, nifty.
So Danny Boyle was impressed with the novel so much that he wrote a letter directly to Irvine Welsh. Mm-hmm. He stated that he would give the film a structure, and that himself and Danny Boyle were the two most important Scottish people since Kenny Dalglish and Alex Ferguson.
Oh, Jesus.
Two legendary soccer managers in England at the time.
Yeah.
But joking aside, Irvine Welsh was impressed with their enthusiasm for the project and the fact that they wanted to make a movie that wasn't a facade piece. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of this stuff in the books,
right,
you could turn into, the next Reefer Madness.
Right. Right.
So he didn't want it to be an art film. He wanted it to be as gritty and as real as when he wrote the stories.
Right. Right. Hodge, Boyle, and MacDonald spent many hours working on the script and the story, deciding on which parts of the books could be used, which characters could be used, substituted, and omitted, because there's a large cast of characters in the book. And so some had to be, as with any book, or movie adaptation of a book, sometimes things are consolidated and, whatnot.
Yes, so for example, right, one of the main characters, Tommy, a lot of his story and elements, Tommy's story in the book. But there's also two characters called Second Prize and Maddie, who their stories were kind of intertwined with Tommy and Begbie, so to speak. So, so Tommy had his own story. But the first draft was completed in December of 1994, mm-hmm. and not long after that, they managed to get funding from Channel 4 to do that. Channel 4 was into that kind of thing at the time, because Channel 4 was the commercial arm of the BBC at that point, if that makes sense. So they had a lot of their funding from the BBC, but through commercialism at the same time.
Right.
And it's an independent channel, but a lot of the BBC stuff used to run on Channel 4 and vice versa. If something got popular on Channel 4 in the UK, it would go to the BBC eventually.
Right.